Somewhere in the dry dirt of a cave in southern Oregon, a team of archaeologists pulled out something that should not exist. They sent it to the lab, and the date that came back was so unbelievable they assumed the equipment had failed. They tested it again using a different sample and a different machine, then repeated the process a third time. Every result pointed to the same astonishing conclusion. Whoever left this evidence behind had been standing on American soil thousands of years before history claimed any humans were here. What Oregon uncovered did not simply revise the story of the first Americans. It challenged the entire foundation of it. The discovery came from the Paisley Caves, a series of dry rock shelters in south-central Oregon that researchers had known about for decades but had never excavated deeply enough. For years, most archaeologists believed the mystery of America's earliest inhabitants had already been solved. So few expected a dusty cave in the Oregon desert to change everything. When scientists finally dug through the ancient layers, they did not uncover a spear point or a stone tool. Instead, they found preserved human waste, perfectly dried by the desert climate, and left exactly where someone had deposited it thousands of years earlier. Although the discovery sounded unimpressive, the cave's unique conditions had preserved something no ordinary artifact could provide: human DNA. Researchers extracted mitochondrial DNA from the samples and identified Native American founding haplogroups A2 and B2, linking the remains directly to the ancestors of indigenous peoples living today. This was not evidence of a failed migration or an extinct population. It was proof that the earliest chapter of America's human story continued through living descendants. Scientists then used accelerator mass spectrometry to date the organic material itself rather than the surrounding soil, eliminating many common concerns about contamination or disturbed layers. The results consistently showed an age of more than 14,000 years before present, at least 1,000 years older than the Clovis culture, long believed to represent the first people in North America. For generations, textbooks taught that the Clovis people crossed a land bridge from Asia around 13,000 years ago before spreading across an empty continent. The Paisley Caves forced researchers to reconsider that entire timeline. Oregon had demonstrated that humans lived in North America well before Clovis, challenging one of archaeology's most established theories and opening the door to an entirely different understanding of how and when the first American arrived. About 70 miles from the Paisley Caves, another Oregon site was quietly producing evidence that would make the case even stronger. Near the town of Riley in Harney County, archaeologist Dr. Patrick O'Grady and his University of Oregon team have been excavating rimrock draw rock shelter since 2011. For years, the work revealed little more than scattered obsidian flakes and a few simple stone tools. But beneath the surface lay something extraordinary. A layer of volcanic ash from the eruption of Mount St. Helens, dated to roughly 15,400 to 15,600 years ago, acted as a natural timestamp. Anything buried below that ash had to be older than the eruption itself. Unlike other dating methods that could be challenged, this volcanic layer created a fixed point in time that could not easily be disputed. Beneath the ash, researchers uncovered fragments of extinct Ice Age animals, including ancient camels and the massive bison antiquus, both of which lived thousands of years before recorded history. Even more remarkable was a carefully crafted orange chalcedony stone tool featuring multiple cutting, scraping, and sawing edges. Years of use had polished its serrated edge smooth, revealing that it had been one person's trusted tool for a very long time before it was finally abandoned. Laboratory tests dated the animal remains to approximately 21,000 to 22,000 years ago, and because the stone tool rested even deeper in the soil, it had to be older still. O'Grady repeated the dating tests to rule out error, but every result confirmed the astonishing timeline. The tool belonged not to the Clovis tradition, but to the Western stem tradition, a completely different style of stone technology that predated Clovis by thousands of years. Its shape, construction, and craftsmanship proved that another culture with its own unique technology already existed in North America long before the people traditionally considered the continent's first inhabitants. With two separate Oregon sites using entirely different forms of evidence, human DNA at Paisley Caves and volcanic dating at Rimrock Draw, the argument against the long-accepted Clovis first model became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Oregon was no longer presenting a single unusual discovery, but a consistent pattern suggesting that humans had reached North America far earlier than generations of archaeologists had believed. Long before the discoveries in Oregon, another archaeological site had already challenged the traditional timeline. In western Pennsylvania, a sandstone shelter known as Meadowcroft Rock Shelter began raising difficult questions decades earlier. The site was first noticed in 1955 when local historian Albert Miller discovered ancient artifacts inside a groundhog burrow. In 1973, archaeologist Dr. James Adevajo launched systematic excavations, carefully removing layer after layer of soil. The deeper the team dug, the older the evidence became. Radiocarbon dating eventually suggested that humans had occupied the shelter between 16,000 and 19,000 years ago, thousands of years before the Clovis culture was believed to exist. When Adevajo published his findings in 1980, many researchers rejected the conclusions, arguing that the samples must have been contaminated or that the dates were simply impossible. Rather than changing the accepted timeline, much of the archaeological community ignored the evidence altogether. The resistance became so strong that critics later described it as Clovis primacy syndrome, referring to the unwillingness to abandon the long-held belief that Clovis people were the continent's first inhabitants. Even decades later, many archaeologists remain divided over Meadowcroft's findings despite years of supporting evidence. Oregon's discoveries eventually gave new credibility to those earlier claims by showing that Meadowcroft was not an isolated anomaly, but part of a growing pattern of pre-Clovis sites across North America. The evidence became even more compelling in New Mexico at White Sands National Park, where researchers discovered 61 remarkably preserved human footprints pressed into the ancient shoreline of what had once been Lake Otero. The footprints belonged to adults and children, capturing ordinary moments of people walking across soft mud that later hardened and remained preserved for thousands of years. Initial radiocarbon dating of plant seeds placed the footprints between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Skeptics questioned whether the seeds had absorbed ancient carbon, so scientists conducted additional tests using conifer pollen and later organic material from lake sediments. Each independent study produced nearly identical dates, confirming that humans were living in North America during the height of the last ice age. The footprints appeared alongside tracks left by mammoths and giant ground sloths, proving that humans and Ice Age animals shared the landscape at a time when conventional history claimed the continent was still uninhabited. Together, the evidence from Meadowcroft, Oregon, and White Sands transformed isolated discoveries into a consistent body of evidence that increasingly challenged the traditional story of when the first Americans arrived. The evidence became even more controversial in Southern California, where an ordinary freeway construction project uncovered one of the most debated archaeological discoveries ever recorded. Construction crews accidentally exposed the remains of a mastodon, an elephant-like Ice Age animal that had gone extinct thousands of years ago. When paleontologists examined the site, they noticed that the bones displayed spiral fractures, a distinctive pattern created when fresh bones are deliberately broken to extract nutrient-rich marrow. Nearby lay several large cobblestones that showed signs of being used as hammerstones and anvils, indicating that someone had intentionally processed the carcass. Geological analysis confirmed the stones had not been carried there naturally by water, but had been transported by human hands. Uranium-thorium dating repeatedly placed the mastodon remains at approximately 130,700 years old, a date so astonishing that it exceeded the accepted timeline for human migration into the Americas by more than 100,000 years. Published in Nature in 2017, the discovery immediately sparked intense debate. While many researchers argue the evidence was too extraordinary to accept, others maintain that the fractured bones and transported stones strongly suggested the presence of an unknown human ancestor in North America long before modern humans were believed to have arrived. Although the California site remains highly controversial, it expanded the debate beyond Oregon and forced archaeologists to consider possibilities once thought impossible. These discoveries also renewed questions about how the earliest people reached the Americas. For generations, the dominant explanation centered on Beringia, the land bridge that connected Siberia and Alaska during the Ice Age, allowing humans to walk into North America. However, Oregon's Western STEM tradition tools differed significantly from Clovis technology, suggesting a separate migration route. Additional discoveries on the Greek island of Crete revealed stone tools dating back between 130,000 and 700,000 years, proving that ancient human ancestors possessed the ability to cross open water far earlier than previously believed. Genetic studies tracing mitochondrial lineage D4H also pointed toward an early coastal migration from northern China around 26,000 years ago, with small groups gradually traveling by boat along the Pacific coastline over many generations. A second migration around 15,000 years ago likely crossed the Bering Land Bridge and became associated with the Clovis culture. Rather than representing the first Americans, Clovis may have been a later wave arriving on a continent already occupied by earlier populations. Together, archaeological evidence from Oregon, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, California, genetics, and ancient seafaring research painted an increasingly complex picture of human migration, replacing the simple Clovis first model with a far older and far more complicated history of the first people to reach the Americas. Taken together, the discoveries from Oregon and across North America point toward a very different story of the first Americans than the one taught for generations. The Paisley Caves provided human DNA and radiocarbon dates older than Clovis, while rimrock draw produced ancient stone tools buried beneath volcanic ash that independently confirmed an even earlier human presence. Meadowcroft rock shelter reinforced that evidence with pre-Clovis occupation in the eastern United States, and the White Sands footprints captured entire families walking across an Ice Age landscape more than 20,000 years ago. Even the controversial California Mastodon site raised difficult questions that mainstream archaeology has yet to fully answer. At the same time, advances in genetics and studies of ancient seafaring suggested that the first migrations into the Americas may not have followed a single route or occurred during one brief period. Instead of one group crossing a land bridge into an empty continent, multiple waves of people may have arrived by both coastal and inland routes over thousands of years, bringing different technologies, cultures, and survival strategies with them. Oregon's Western STEM tradition tools fit naturally into this broader picture, hinting that some of the earliest Americans developed separately from the later Clovis culture rather than descending directly from it. Although many questions remain unanswered, the growing body of archaeological, genetic, and geological evidence has made one conclusion increasingly difficult to ignore. The history of human settlement in the Americas is far older and far more complex than previously believed. Every new excavation has the potential to uncover another piece of the puzzle, and each discovery forces scientists to rethink long-standing assumptions about humanity's earliest journey into the New World. Somewhere beneath untouched layers of Earth, the next breakthrough may already be waiting, ready to reshape our understanding of the distant past once again. The discoveries continue to spark debate because they challenge ideas that shaped archaeology for more than a century. While many researchers now accept that people reached the Americas before the Clovis culture, the exact timing, migration routes, and identities of those earliest populations remain active areas of scientific research. Some sites, such as Paisley Caves, Rimrock Draw, Meadowcroft Rock Shelter, and White Sands, have gained increasing acceptance as evidence for pre-Clovis occupation, while others, including the California Mastodon site, remain highly controversial and continue to divide experts. Even so, the overall trend is clear. The old picture of a single migration through Beringia around 13,000 years ago is no longer sufficient to explain the growing body of archaeological, genetic, and geological evidence. Instead, scientists are considering a far more complex history involving multiple migrations, different technologies, and populations that may have arrived by both coastal and inland routes over many thousands of years. What began with a few unexpected discoveries in the dry caves of southern Oregon has expanded into one of the biggest scientific debates about human history in North America. Every excavation, every newly dated artifact, and every advance in DNA analysis adds another piece to the puzzle, reminding researchers that history is never truly finished. Somewhere beneath untouched soil, hidden inside another cave, buried beneath ancient ash, or preserved beneath layers of sediment, the next discovery may already be waiting. One capable of transforming our understanding of the first Americans once again and proving that humanity's earliest chapters are still being written today. Whether the next breakthrough comes from Oregon or somewhere else in the world, one thing has become increasingly clear. The story of the first Americans is still unfolding. Each new excavation reminds scientists that history is not fixed. It evolves as fresh evidence emerges. Sites once dismissed as impossible are now being re-examined, while new technologies such as advanced DNA sequencing, radiocarbon dating, sediment analysis, and ground-penetrating surveys continue revealing clues hidden for tens of thousands of years. Questions that once seemed settled, who arrived first when they came, and how they reached the Americas, are now among the most exciting mysteries in archaeology. Although many pieces of the puzzle remain missing, every discovery brings researchers one step closer to understanding humanity's earliest presence on the continent. The caves of Oregon, the footprints at White Sands, the shelters of Pennsylvania, and other remarkable sites have all contributed to a growing realization that the peopling of the Americas was likely far more ancient, diverse, and complex than anyone imagined only a few decades ago. As archaeologists continue digging deeper and testing new evidence, the next discovery could once again rewrite the timeline, proving that beneath the soil of North America, countless secrets of our distant past are still waiting to be uncovered. For now, the debate is far from over, and that may be the most fascinating part of all. Every major discovery forces archaeologists to balance skepticism with an openness to new evidence, ensuring that extraordinary claims are tested as rigorously as possible. Some findings will undoubtedly be challenged, others may eventually be confirmed, and new discoveries could overturn today's theories just as today's evidence has overturned yesterday's. That is how science advances, not by protecting old ideas, but by following the evidence wherever it leads. From the preserved DNA hidden inside Oregon's Paisley Caves to the ancient tools beneath volcanic ash at Rimrock Draw, from the footprints frozen in the gypsum sands of New Mexico to controversial discoveries in California, each site has added another chapter to a story that is still being written. What once appeared to be a simple migration across a land bridge has evolved into a far richer and more complicated narrative involving multiple migrations, changing climates, and generations of people adapting to unfamiliar landscapes thousands of years before recorded history. As archaeologists continue exploring untouched caves, ancient riverbanks, buried campsites, and forgotten rock shelters across North America, there is every reason to believe that even greater discoveries lie ahead. The next artifact, footprint, or fragment of DNA could once again reshape our understanding of humanity's earliest journey into the Americas, reminding us that the greatest discoveries are often found where no one thought to look. As researchers continue investigating these remarkable sites, one lesson stands above all others. History is never truly complete. Every generation of archaeologists inherits new technologies, better dating methods, and fresh evidence that allows long-held assumptions to be tested again. Discoveries once dismissed as impossible can eventually become accepted fact, while established theories may be replaced by explanations that better fit the evidence. The findings from Oregon, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, California, and other locations have already transformed the discussion surrounding the first Americans, suggesting that the peopling of the continent was not a single event, but a long and complex process involving multiple migrations, diverse cultures, and changing environments over thousands of years. Although many mysteries remain unresolved, including exactly who the earliest settlers were and how they reached North America, the search continues with every new excavation. Somewhere beneath layers of untouched earth, another cave, ancient campsite, or forgotten shelter may already hold the next piece of the puzzle. Until that discovery is made, the story of humanity's earliest presence in the Americas remains one of archaeology's greatest unanswered questions, reminding us that the past still has many secrets waiting to be uncovered.